up, reader fam? Today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books of 2018. I've got 10 books that I've selected as favorites that I read from this year, and I'm stoked to talk about them. Before I get started though, I did want to mention that there are quite a few popular books that I haven't read yet, like A Map of Days, Queen of Air and Darkness, Kingdom of Ash. So that's why none of those books are on this list. It might end up on next year's list if I end up reading them and loving them. I just wanted to throw that out there before I got comments going, where's Kingdom of Ash? Where's Queen of Air and Darkness? A Map of Days? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Also, the books mentioned on this list aren't necessarily books that were all released in 2018. I have some backlist titles on this list, and that's because I don't only read brand new releases. Now that we've got that nonsense out of the way, let's talk books. First up, I have here Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This book follows this boy named Will, whose brother is shot and killed, and Will decides that he's going to get revenge on his brother's killer. When he gets on an elevator to make his way to this killer to take him out, all these people from his past who have passed on reveal themselves to him, and they each pour into him a new perspective. They help him open his eyes and see the situation in a different light. This one was really unexpected for me, but I also feel like it was the jumping point for Jason Reynolds to become one of my new favorite authors. I'm pretty critical when it comes to books written in verse, which I forgot to mention, this book is written in verse. There have been ones in the past that I've read that have just majorly unimpressed me, but this one showed up, knocked on my door, and said, I'm gonna come in here and show you what a book written in verse is supposed to look like. Also, if you don't know what a book written in verse is, to simply put it, it's a book written in poetry. The concept of the story is original and it's executed in such a great way. Even though this is a rather short book, we still have things like character growth and character depth, which are two things that I feel like are hard to accomplish in this format, but Jason Reynolds delivered. Essentially, this is a story about a boy who is tackling these ideals that he's grown up with. He's just known them to be a part of his life, and it's him coming to the realization that he doesn't have to continue down that road. He can pave his own path. This book is also kind of haunting in the best kind of way, and it really makes you think because there are so many different topics that are kind of brought up along the way. And a major positive thing about this book is that it's a super quick read. You could read this book in like an hour or two, and that's not a long time to be hit with some powerful words. So hit up the library, check this book out, and be hit with some powerful filled words, and then come back and tell me all your feels. Next up here, I have an oldie that I read this year, and that is Wonderstruck by SELZNICK. In this book, we follow two deaf characters. Well, one is fully deaf and then the other is half deaf. The two storylines are told in different ways. We've got one storyline that's told through words, and then the other storyline is told through illustrations. The first perspective that we follow is the perspective of Ben, and after his mother passes away, he becomes extremely curious about his family history because he never really knew that much information about his father. And after a few little discoveries, he goes on this journey to track down his father. Meanwhile, we follow the other perspective of a girl named Rose, and she's on a journey of her own in a completely different time period. And by the end of this story, these two storylines mash together. Like mashed potatoes, except not. This is the most magical book that I've ever read that doesn't have magic in it. For some reason, reading this, it just has the most magical atmosphere to it, and the way that these two stories come together in the end will just make your heart flutter. Flutter, flutter. I just love the way that SELZNICK tells stories. There are just so many things that he does that I admire. I obviously love his illustrations. They are top notch. They're so good. If you didn't know, SELZNICK is actually the one responsible for the latest Harry Potter covers, which are amazing. I feel like his books are rich in detail in both the illustrations, but also in the writing style. I do think that his books are kind of more so plot focused. Not to say that his characters are weak, because I think his characters are incredible too, but I feel like he really focuses in on building a well-structured plot. I adore his writing style. It's weirdly got this like warm feeling to it, which is something that I can't even thoroughly explain. If you've read his books, then you probably know what I mean. It makes you feel like this, but on the inside. This is a middle grade book, but I honestly feel like Brian's books are for anyone. So don't hear middle grade and go, ah. All in all, it's a beautiful story, and I loved it just as much as I loved Brian's other books. Next up, I have another Jason Reynolds book, and that is For Everyone, which honestly, this probably shouldn't be on my list because it's not necessarily a book, like it's just a poem, but it's in book form, so I'm gonna mention it because I loved it. It was everything. And this motivated me in a time when I really needed motivation. I should actually reread this because I need a big kick in the butt to get things going again. But this is a poem for everyone, as the title says, for everyone. If you're in need of hearing some uplifting words on something that you want to do in your life, this is the poem for you. He talks about how no matter where you're at in life, you can conjure up a new dream for your life and run after it. It's never too late. Next up, I have another Jason Reynolds book, which I probably should have spaced these out a little bit more, but oh well. Anyway, that book is All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. This story has a focus on police brutality, and we follow the perspective of two different boys. We've got Rashad, who is black, and one night he goes to this gas station and he's just minding his own business, picking out some snacks, and an incident in the store leads him to being wrongfully accused for assaulting a woman. The officer who handles the situation doesn't handle it very well. In fact, he gets pretty violent, and it leaves Rashad in the hospital. And on the other hand, we follow Quinn, who is white, and he watches this whole situation go down. He's both a classmate to Rashad and also a family friend of the police officer. This whole situation blows up, it hits the national news, and it ends up starting all these different protests. Quinn knows the truth of what happened, but he's struggling with doing what's right and being loyal to his family friend. Something that I really appreciated and respected about this book is that even though it talks about this really touchy subject, that being police brutality, it handles it in a really respectful way, and it emphasizes the fact that not all policemen are bad. This is one that's sure to get you thinking and questioning yourself, and it's an excellent and powerful read. Next up, I have here The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. This book follows this girl named Lee, and her mother died by suicide, and she's convinced herself that through this process, her mother ended up turning into a bird. And she believes that her mother now resides in Taiwan where her grandparents live, so she heads there to get to the bottom of this bird business. The thing that I loved the most about this book is just how it covered the topic of grief. It does it in a really moving, powerful, and creative way. This is one of those books where for the most part it's a contemporary story, like it's realistic fiction, but then there's kind of this touch of magic that comes into play, and I love books that do this. The writing style is also superb. She did a really fantastic job of portraying the feelings and emotions that come with grief through words. It was just executed so flawlessly. This is one of those books that while it does cover a really heavy topic, it's not one that's super draining, and I really appreciated that. It's also just a story that really unfolds in a really nice and beautiful way. Next up here I have Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 6th book in the Throne of Glass series, and it follows my brother from another mother, Kale Westfall. After things that happened to him in the past books, this book is his journey to... how do I say it without spoiling anything? His journey in reinventing himself. Sure, we'll go with that. I'm really sad that it took me so long to read this book because I ended up loving it. Kale got the book that he deserved. I've rooted for him since the beginning when everybody misunderstood him, and I feel like this book was a big turning point for a lot of readers of this series. Like, I feel like a lot of people left this book kind of respecting Kale, but not only for readers, like I feel like this book was also a big turning point for Kale himself. We see quite a bit of character growth in this book, which as much as I love Kale, I know that he needed that character growth. A major thing that I liked about this book was just how chill it was. Compared to the other books in the series, this was like a time out. Crazy things still end up happening in this book, but it's mostly a chill break time from all the madness. Next up here I have The Storied Life of A.J. FIKRY by Gabrielle Zevin. This book follows the story of a bookstore owner by the name of A.J. FIKRY. He lives on the floor above his bookstore, which honestly, goals. I want to live on the floor above a bookstore. You can count me in for that. But at the same time, that's probably not the best idea because I just drained my bank account. Mr. FIKRY is going through some hardships. He's lost his wife. His bookstore isn't really poppin', and his rare collection of Poe poems has gone missing. But one day he's left with something that completely changes his life. I can't say what that thing is because it'll spoil the book, but what he's left with ends up becoming a bit of a good luck charm for him. His life pretty much turns around and starts going in a better direction. This book was so delightful. I feel like the best way to describe this book is that it was just so heartwarming. It's a book that I didn't think that I would like because right off the bat our main character is described as a bit of a book snob, and I wasn't about to follow a character like that, but he quickly grew on me. Something that really stuck out to me with this book is how it's a book that's kind of built on all these little moments. It has all these different moments of this person's life and then threads them all together, and I really loved that about it. Next up here I have An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This book is about these robot robot-like creatures that start popping up all around the world. And we follow a girl named April May who has this video go viral that's surrounding these robots. While it's a story about figuring out the mystery with the robots, it also touches a lot on social media. And honestly, those were the two things that I really loved about this book. I loved the mystery of the robots. It was so much fun following these characters that were trying to get to the bottom of these robots, and that whole storyline just completely unraveled in a really unexpected way, which is something that I really liked about this book. I was thinking it was going in this direction, and it was like, nope, we're going this way, okay? Hold on tight, here we go! The other thing that I really loved was how it talked about social media. It talks about the good aspects of it and then the dark aspects of it, and I find the subject of social media to be a great one to explore in books because there's so much you can talk about with it. It's such a complex topic, and coming from someone who has a lot of themselves on social media, I can often find things very relatable when it's explored. Next up I have here Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. This book is about this dragon that shows up every 1,000 years and he'll grant your wish. The thing is, you have to have this completed scroll. But the scroll is in 3 pieces, so you gotta find those 3 pieces, combine them together in order for this dragon to grant your wish. We follow a kitsune who has one part of the scroll, and her path crosses with this samurai who is trying to track down the different pieces of the scroll. Our main girl convinces him to join her on the hunt to find the other pieces of the scroll, while also keeping the fact that she has part of the scroll a secret from him. I didn't give this book a 5 out of 5 stars, I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars, but on an entertainment level, I would give this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and it's one that I've thought about and continue to think about after I finished it. The more that I sit on it, the more that I love everything about it, which is why I decided to include it on this list, because I had a good old time reading this book. A good old time! This isn't going to be a book that's for everyone, and I get that. Not everybody is going to read this book and love it like me. This was the fantasy, Japanese mythology-inspired book that I have been wanting, I have been craving. I finally found it, and it feels dang good. It's a book that, while it does have a main plot, it's a book that's kind of built up on all these little subplots, which I actually really liked that about it, and this book does a really good job of like establishing the characters, which I think is great because now when book 2 comes out, we'll be familiar with this crew of characters, and we'll be ready for whatever they're about to take on. If you're a fan of anime, this one lends itself to be kind of envisioned as an anime as you're reading it. If you've ever watched the anime Inuyasha, this has a very Inuyasha vibe to it. And the last book on my favorite books of 2018 list is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This book takes place in a world that has been under attack for decades, and pilots are considered heroes as they help keep the human race alive. We've got our main character Spinsa, who is dying to become a pilot, but because of her dad's bad reputation when it comes to being a pilot, people are constantly using this against her. But nonetheless, she keeps fighting for her dream. One day she discovers something in a tavern that could benefit her in achieving her dreams. There's so much more to this book, but I honestly don't know how to properly explain it without spoiling it, so that's all I'm gonna give you. This is one of those books where I read it and I was like, I'm gonna need everyone else to read this book so that we can talk about it and love it together. Even though I know this is a book that not everyone's gonna love. Sanderson's world building is flawless, and it's the thing that I eat right up when I read one of his books. Spinsa might not be the most lovable character right off the bat, but you can't help but root for her, especially because of the fact that she's an underdog. Also, she does grow a lot throughout this book, so by the end of it, she is a changed person. And lastly, the action scenes. There was lots of boom boom pows happening, and I was living. I don't know what else to say, but I loved it, and that's all you need to know, okay? I loved it. It was great. Fantastic. Amazing. I need to read more Sanderson ASAP. So those were my favorite books that I read in the year of 2018. I'm hoping that I read and love more books in 2019 because while I did have a pretty good reading year, I didn't like die hard love as many books this year as I have in the past. So I'm hoping that next year I read a lot of books that I just die hard love. You guys should let me know down below in the comments some favorite books that you have from the year of 2018 because I need to know some books that you straight up loved. This is my last video for this year, so I will see you guys next year. I've got lots of content coming your way, so get ready for it, okay? I'm honestly so ready for the content I have coming for you guys. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. I post videos frequently on this channel, so if you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye. Chew.